Family, listen to me today. There comes a moment in every believer's life when God whispers, "You can't stay where you are." Not because where you are is bad, but because where you are is beneath where He's taking you. Normal is not sinful, but it is small. Normal is not wrong, but it is limiting. Normal is not broken, but it is not God's final word over your life. You were not created to fit into the mold. You were created to break it. There is a promise over your life that requires you to step out of routine, out of fear, out of predictability, out of the familiar patterns that have kept you in the shallow waters. God is calling you into the deep places where your faith must rise, where your trust must stretch, and where your destiny waits. Hear this: comfort is the enemy of calling. You cannot walk in God's extraordinary while holding on to your ordinary. Abraham had to leave home. Moses had to leave the backside of the desert. Peter had to step out of the boat. Every person God elevated had to walk away from what was normal. Why? Because God's promise is not found in the place you've settled. It's found in the place He's sending you. Some of you are praying for God to open doors while still standing in rooms He never intended for you to stay in. You're asking for new while clinging to old. You're believing for promise but living in patterns that keep you stuck. Listen carefully. God will not give you a promised land while you insist on living in Egypt. There is a shift coming. There is a breakthrough forming. There is a divine transition already in motion, but it requires movement. It requires obedience. It requires the courage to walk away from your normal, the version of yourself you settled for, so you can step into the version God designed you to be. You are not who you used to be. You are not stuck where you started. You are not bound by your past. The promise is calling you louder than your fear, deeper than your doubt, stronger than your excuses. This is not the season to shrink. This is not the season to hide. This is not the season to stay in the shallow. This is the season to step out. Step out of normal thinking. Step out of normal living. Step out of normal expectations. Because God's promise is anything but normal. His plans are bigger. His ways are higher. His purpose is greater. So lift your head, square your shoulders, and walk boldly into the next chapter. The God who called you out will never abandon you on the way. The promise is waiting. Destiny is waiting. The future He designed for you is waiting. Step out of the normal and into the promise that God has already prepared for you. And if you believe it, shout amen. You cannot step into promise while clinging to what's comfortable. Comfort feels safe, predictable, familiar. It's the space where nothing challenges you, nothing stretches you, nothing demands more from you than you're already giving. But comfort is also the place where dreams go to sleep, where purpose gets quiet, and where calling becomes something you talk about rather than something you walk into. Comfort can feel like peace, but often it is actually paralysis dressed in soft clothing. It holds you with gentle hands but keeps you from reaching for what God has already assigned to your future. There comes a moment in every life where the whisper of destiny becomes louder than the echoes of familiarity. Something inside you starts to shift. You begin to feel a pull, not away from something bad, but toward something greater. And that pull is a signal that your comfort zone has expired. It has done its job. It kept you safe while you were growing, but now it's too small to contain who you are becoming. Clinging to comfort is like trying to breathe in a room with no space left. You outgrow mindsets, habits, relationships, environments, even versions of yourself. Yet many people stay because staying is easier than stepping. Staying doesn't require faith. Staying doesn't require courage. Staying doesn't require change, but staying also doesn't produce destiny. Every promise God gives demands motion, movement of the mind, movement of the spirit, movement of the feet. You cannot hold onto the familiar with one hand and reach for the future with the other. Eventually, you will have to let go of something. Comfort keeps you repeating cycles, but promise pulls you into seasons. Cycles are predictable, seasons are purposeful. A cycle keeps you where you've been. A season calls you where you're meant to be. When God is ready to elevate you, He will disturb your comfort. He will unsettle the nest. He will interrupt patterns. He will let things that once satisfied you no longer feel enough. Not because you failed, but because you're no longer meant to fit inside the shape of who you once were. Comfort says, stay here. It's safe. Promise says, come here. I've prepared something greater. Comfort asks no questions. Promise requires big ones. Are you willing to grow? Are you willing to trust? Are you willing to release what no longer fits so you can receive what God has been holding for you? The truth is, comfort is not evil, it's just incomplete. It can sustain you, but it cannot transform you. Transformation only happens when you step outside what you know and step into what God knows. And God knows the plans He has for you. Plans to prosper you, stretch you, increase you, refine you, and elevate you. But you cannot walk into those plans while standing still in the familiar. Every major miracle in Scripture is tied to someone who moved. Not someone who understood everything, not someone who felt ready, someone who moved, someone who took a step when the step didn't make sense, someone who trusted God more than they trusted comfort. God never asks you to leave comfort without preparing a promise on the other side. Your next level, next opportunity, next revelation, next open door, none of it is found in the place where you feel most secure. It is found in the place where you feel most surrendered. Letting go of comfort is not losing. It is trading small for significant. Trading familiar for divine. Trading limited for limitless. The moment you release your grip on the normal, your hands become free to receive what God has been holding for you all along. God's promises require movement, not just belief. Too many people think faith is something you hold in your heart, something you whisper in prayer, something you hope for in the quiet corners of your mind. But genuine faith is more than agreement, it's action. It's not simply believing God can do it. It's positioning yourself so He will do it in your life. Faith has feet, faith steps, faith stretches, faith walks into what eyes cannot yet see and hands cannot yet touch. Belief alone can inspire you, but movement activates what you believe. You can sit still and dream, but dreams only become destiny when you dare to move toward them. You can declare promises all day long, but declarations without steps become echoes in empty rooms. Every promise God has released over your life is waiting for you on the other side of obedience. Not emotional obedience, not convenient obedience, real, costly, forward, moving obedience. God responds to motion. When you move, heaven moves with you. When you take a step, the path becomes clearer. When you shift your position, God shifts your reality. The waters didn't part for the Israelites until they walked toward them. The man with the withered hand wasn't healed until he stretched it. The woman with the issue of blood didn't receive her breakthrough until she pushed through the crowd. Movement is the language of faith. Movement is the evidence that you trust God more than you trust circumstances. You cannot pray for open doors while sitting in the same hallway you've been in for years. You cannot ask for increase while refusing to release what is small. You cannot expect a new season while repeating the same habits that built the last one. God gives promise, but you give pursuit. You give positioning, you give preparation. Promise without pursuit becomes potential that never manifests. Some people think they're waiting on God, but the truth is God is waiting on them, waiting for them to step out, waiting for them to decide, waiting for them to move beyond fear, beyond excuses, beyond procrastination, waiting for them to take the step that aligns their life with His intention. God's promise is not passive, and neither can your faith be. You cannot sit in stagnation and expect transformation. Movement doesn't always mean giant leaps. Sometimes it means small, consistent, obedient steps. Steps that nobody sees. Steps that feel insignificant. Steps that don't look like progress, but are building the foundation for something greater. God honors effort. God honors courage. God honors the one who says, I don't fully understand where this leads, but I trust the one who's leading. Movement is uncomfortable because it requires leaving the space where excuses feel safe. It requires facing the unknown. It demands strength you didn't know you had and trust that goes beyond logic. But that's exactly why movement reveals promise, because it forces you to rely on God, not yourself. Faith without movement is just admiration. Faith with movement is transformation. The moment you take a step, however small, you show heaven that you're ready. Ready for change, ready for growth, ready for breakthrough, ready for the promise God has prepared. So don't just believe for it, move for it. Don't just hope for it, walk toward it. Don't just pray for it. Position yourself to receive it, because God's promises are not found in the place where you're standing. They're found in the place He's calling you to step into. Normal is safe, but promise is transformational. There is nothing inherently wrong with normal. Normal is predictable. Normal is manageable. Normal is comfortable. Normal is the space where you don't have to question yourself, stretch yourself, or risk yourself. Normal is the place where life makes sense. But hear this clearly, nothing extraordinary is ever birthed in normal. Normal is the environment where you survive, but promise is the environment where you transform. And transformation is never gentle. It disrupts, it reshapes, it refines. It demands the version of you that normal never asked for. Normal lets you stay small. Promise requires you to grow. Normal allows you to settle. Promise invites you to elevate. Normal keeps you in routines. Promise places you in revelation. The danger with normal is that it can deceive you into thinking that stability is the same as destiny. You can be functioning, but not fulfilled. You can be busy, but not growing. You can be surrounded, but not aligned. Normal can look peaceful on the outside while drying up your purpose on the inside. Promise, however, awakens everything that normal numbed in you. Promise stirs your spirit, widens your vision, and presses you into a version of yourself you didn't know you could be. Normal asks nothing from you. Promise asks all of you. Normal says, just stay the same. Promise says, become what you were created to be. Normal keeps you in cycles. You do the same things, think the same thoughts, live the same patterns, but promise introduces seasons. New lessons, new stretching, new challenges that grow you instead of confining you. You cannot expect a God, God-sized transformation while holding onto a human-sized comfort zone. Transformation always requires transition. You cannot be changed and remain familiar at the same time. Think about a seed. As long as a seed stays in your hand, it stays normal, safe, unchanged, but when it is buried, pressured, and stretched beneath the soil, then transformation begins. Promise always starts with discomfort. Something breaks open before something grows upward. Something dies before something can bloom. That is the nature of transformation. It disrupts before it delivers. Many people ask God for promise but cling to normal. They want elevation without disruption, growth without stretching, breakthrough without breaking routine. But promise doesn't come wrapped in the familiar. It comes wrapped in challenge, trust, surrender, and change. The promise God has for you is designed to expand your capacity, stretch your faith, and enlarge your identity. It does not fit the confines of normal living. Normal is where you understand everything. Promise is where you trust God with what you can't explain. Normal is what you can build. Promise is what God can build through you. Normal relies on your strength. Promise relies on His strength. That's why it transforms you. Because it forces you to lean on a power greater than yourself. So if life feels uncomfortable, if you feel stretched, if you feel like the ground beneath you is shifting, don't panic. That is the sound of transformation. That is the sound of promise. That is the signal that God is moving you beyond surviving into becoming. You're not being pushed out of normal. You're being invited into destiny. Normal preserves you, but promise transforms you. And transformation is the pathway to everything God has prepared for your life. Every God-sized promise demands a God-sized obedience. The promises of God are not small, convenient, or easily contained. They carry weight, purpose, and destiny. And because they are great, the obedience required to walk into them must also be great. You cannot expect a divine outcome while giving minimal commitment. God's promises are too big to fit inside half-hearted obedience. Obedience is not simply doing what is easy or comfortable. True obedience asks you to do what stretches you, challenges you, and sometimes scares you. It asks you to trust God when the instructions don't make sense. It asks you to follow when you don't have all the details. It asks you to move when you would rather wait and understand every step. God-sized obedience is saying yes even when you don't know what the yes will cost. When God calls you, He doesn't call you to something that fits neatly into your life plan. He calls you into something greater than you imagined, something that requires surrender, something that requires letting go of control, something that requires you to step into a level of trust you've never walked in before. God-sized promise always pulls you beyond your limits so you can discover His unlimited power. Some people want the promise but not the process. They want the blessing but not the obedience. They want the miracle but not the instruction attached to it. But the promise is always connected to obedience. God told Noah to build an ark even when rain had never existed. God told Abraham to leave everything familiar for a land he had never seen. God told Joshua to march around walls instead of fighting with force. He told the disciples to cast their nets again when they had exhausted their strength. None of it made sense, but all of it required obedience before the miracle appeared. God-sized obedience means you stop negotiating with God about what he already made clear. It means you stop trying to modify his instructions to fit your comfort. It means you stop delaying what he told you to do immediately. Obedience is not obedience if it comes only when it feels convenient. Obedience is obedience when it comes at a cost. Your pride, your timing, your plan, your fear, your excuses. The reason obedience is so powerful is because it's evidence that you trust him more than yourself. It shows heaven that you are ready to carry what he gave you, ready to walk into what he assigned, ready to steward what he's about to release. Some doors stay closed not because the promise isn't prepared, but because the obedience isn't complete. And understand this, obedience doesn't take from you, it prepares you. It shapes you for the weight of the promise. It strengthens your character, sharpens your discernment, and anchors your faith. God will never give you something your obedience hasn't built the capacity for. He loves you too much to let the blessing crush you. God-sized obedience often takes you into uncomfortable places because that is where dependence on him becomes real. It's in obedience that clarity comes. It's in obedience that breakthrough comes. It's in obedience that transformation comes. You discover who you truly are in the steps you take, not in the thoughts you think. Obedience reveals destiny. So, when God nudges you, move. When he whispers, listen. When he instructs, act. Don't wait for perfect timing. Don't wait for signs. Don't wait for everything to make sense. Move because he said move. Do what he asks, even if you feel unqualified. Trust him beyond your logic. Walk by faith, not by sight, because every God-sized promise is waiting on the other side of a God-sized obedience. You must release what you know to receive what God knows. There is a tension that every believer faces, a pull between the familiar and the divine, between what you can understand and what God is trying to reveal. What you know feels stable, it feels solid, it feels predictable. You've built your life around it, structured your decisions around it, and shaped your identity around it. But what you know is limited, and what God knows is limitless. And you cannot carry both at the same time. There are seasons where God will intentionally dismantle your understanding so he can expand your vision. He will close doors you thought would always stay open, shift relationships you thought would last forever, and interrupt routines you thought were secure. Not because he's punishing you, but because he's preparing you. Preparation often looks like loss when you don't yet see the promise on the other side. But God cannot put divine revelation into hands that are still gripping human assumptions. What you know is your comfort zone, but what God knows is your destiny. And destiny always asks you to trade the temporary for the eternal, the seen for the unseen, the predictable for the purposeful. God knows where he's taking you. God knows who you're becoming. God knows the battles ahead and the strength you'll need to fight them. God knows the opportunities waiting for you, the rooms you're going to walk into, the people you're meant to impact. But to receive what he knows, you must be willing to unlearn what you've been holding onto. Sometimes the greatest barrier to your next blessing is not your weakness, it's your certainty. You're so sure of your plan, your timeline, your strategy, your understanding, that you leave no space for God to interrupt you with something better. God will not compete with what you cling to. If your hands are full of yesterday, you have no capacity for tomorrow. If your heart is full of old thinking, there's no room for new revelation. If your mind is full of old patterns, God cannot pour fresh vision into you. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is trusting. Letting go is declaring, God, I don't see everything you see, but I trust everything you know. Because God knows when to move you. He knows what to remove. He knows what to restore. He knows what to rearrange. He knows how to guide you into the place where promise lies. The greatest breakthroughs often begin with surrender. The moment you stop insisting on your way is the moment God can finally show you His way. And His way is higher. His way is wiser. His way is filled with purpose far beyond your limited understanding. But you cannot walk in revelation while insisting on familiarity, so release the fear that keeps you small. Release the mindset that keeps you stuck. Release the expectations that no longer serve who you are becoming. Release the version of yourself that survived but cannot lead you into promise. Every time you release something, heaven makes room for something greater. Every surrender becomes a seed. Every letting go becomes an opening. Every act of trust becomes a doorway into the next dimension of your calling. You must release what you know, not because it was wrong, but because God is ready to replace it with something infinitely greater. Your next season is connected to your willingness to walk away from the last one. Life is made of chapters, but many people never reach the next chapter because they keep rereading the previous one. They stay tied to moments that have already fulfilled their purpose. They cling to roles they've already outgrown. They remain loyal to seasons God has already ended. And then they wonder why growth feels delayed, why clarity feels distant, why breakthrough feels out of reach. It's not that God hasn't prepared the next, it's that they haven't released the last. Every season has an assignment. Some seasons teach you strength, some teach you faith, some teach you discernment, some teach you endurance. But no season, no matter how beautiful or painful, was meant to be permanent. When a season has given you what it was supposed to give, God begins to nudge you forward. He disrupts your comfort, stirs your spirit, and creates a holy dissatisfaction not to frustrate you, but to awaken you. Because even though your heart may still be in the last season, His promise is waiting in the next one. Walking away doesn't always mean walking away from something bad. Sometimes you must walk away from something good to receive something divine. Sometimes you leave stable for supernatural. Sometimes you leave familiar for fruitful. Sometimes you leave what you've mastered for what will mature you. And that transition is uncomfortable. Not because God is unclear, but because you're shifting identities. You're leaving the version of yourself that fit the last season, so you can step into the version God crafted for the next one. You cannot carry the mentality of a past season into the demands of a future season. Old thinking won't sustain new responsibilities. Old wounds can't survive new blessings. Old habits can't manage new opportunities. Every elevation requires separation from what kept you small, distracted, limited, or bound. If you stay attached to what God has released you from, you risk losing what He is trying to guide you toward. Walking away is an act of faith. It's declaring with your footsteps what your heart is still learning to believe. God, I trust you with what's ahead more than I fear leaving what's behind. And God honors that kind of faith. He responds to movement. He steps into transition. He meets you in the in-between, the place where old has ended but new hasn't fully begun. In that gap, He shapes you, strengthens you, and prepares you for what's coming. Some seasons are meant to expire because staying in them would slowly shrink you. Staying would turn growth into stagnation, passion into routine, purpose into obligation. But God loves you too much to let you remain where you no longer belong. So he closes doors, he removes options, he stirs discomfort, he redirects your heart. And every time he does, it's because he's guiding you into a season that aligns with your calling, your purpose, your destiny. You cannot embrace what's next without releasing what was. The future God has for you will not fit into the framework of your past. You must walk forward even if your legs shake, even if your voice trembles, even if your heart is still healing. Walking forward is not abandoning your past. It is honoring it by allowing it to complete its assignment. Your next season, your growth, your breakthrough, your elevation, is waiting. It is already prepared. It is already set in motion, but it is connected to your willingness to move, to trust, to let go, to step out, to step forward, because destiny never meets you where you were. It meets you where you're willing to go